Welcome to one of the first episodes of The Book Mind. Today we're going to be taking a look at Christopher Hitchens' book, Letters to a Young Contrarian. Now, if you're not familiar with Hitchens, he was a prolific author, a journalist and an orator. He commented on a wide range of controversial political and religious ideas, and also debate itself. This book is a collection of letters offering advice to people who want to change the status quo, who want to think independently, or perhaps even change the world. But don't worry, you don't have to be particularly radical to get something out of this book. Hitchens writes about a wide range of contrary positions, using strong historical examples to show you their value, and also to show you how an independent mind and how a questioning person might be made up. A free thinker or a dissenter, if you like. Now, if you know Hitchens, you'll know that he has very strong religious and political views. And these are, of course, ever present in his writings. However, I won't be going into these in depth today, because what I want to focus on instead are my 10 key takeaways from reading the text, why I think they're important, and also why I think they might be relevant to you. So, without further ado, let's get started. My first takeaway is to value arguments. Now, arguments can be extremely useful. It's impossible to make any progress without having some conflict of ideas. And it's important that we engage with the arguments so that we can learn something from them. Now, I hear you say that you've had arguments where no one's mind has been changed. And what's the point of them if this is the case? Well, it's rare when you have an argument with someone that their opinion won't be changed in some slight way. There'll be little refinements and little adjustments in what they think and what you think. So there's value in an argument, even if it seems that there isn't at first. Hitchens also reminds us that even if we all agree on one topic, we still need to know our argument for it, just in case we need to justify our position in the future. If in your professional life you're required to collaborate, then you'll likely understand the importance of argument. But you'll also know what an absolute nightmare it can be when it's done wrong. This is where the art of being a contrarian comes in. You need to pick your battles, avoiding ones that are petty and will have no impact at the end of the day, and choosing the ones that are really important. You also need to be able to change your views if a better argument arises. It seems like we're living in an ever more polarised world, and this is usually viewed as bad, consensus being something that we should aim for. Now, Hitchens says the exact opposite. He says that polarisation is good because it allows the conflict of ideas and then gives clarity on those ideas and what to do moving forward. So, don't be afraid to have an argument. Have your voice be heard. So the second point is to reject perfection over pursuit. So you should not strive for perfection, you should strive simply for something to be better. With this sentiment, Hitchens proposes the word pursuit over the word perfection. Perfection implies no change, no effort. It's an unattainable endpoint. Pursuit, however, is nice because it implies that there's struggle, hardship, that which gives us meaning, and most importantly, ongoing improvement. Now, you've probably noticed that this is essentially that corny cliche, it's about the journey, not the destination. And yet, don't worry, that makes me cringe as well. But Hitchens' logic behind it is rather interesting. He proposes that the world is imperfect, that where there are humans, there's inconsistency, strife, and conflict. In other words, to be human is to be imperfect. And so to want for perfection is to want for absolute nothingness. The idea of pursuit over perfection can be applied to all parts of your life. If you have recently achieved a personal or professional goal, I'm willing to bet that one of the big reasons why that meant something to you was because of the work that you put in to make it happen. In other words, it's about the pursuit, not always the end result, not always perfection. So remember to question anything that says that perfection is the ultimate good or the ultimate goal. So the third takeaway is beware arguments for inaction. Hitchens cites an old Cambridge academic, F.M. Cranford, who says that there is only one argument for doing something, and the rest of the arguments are arguments for doing nothing. So today I'm going to give you two arguments that he proposed for inaction. In other words, two excuses to do nothing. The first argument is the principle of the dangerous precedent, which dictates that I shouldn't do anything that I determine to be right for fear that I won't be able to do what is right again in future cases. Now, this is obviously quite illogical because it follows that, well, I'd never do anything for the first time. Now, I almost fell prey to this exact argument myself without even knowing it. When deciding whether to start a YouTube channel with my friend Demetrius, I thought maybe I'll just post the first video, and then I don't know if I'll be committed enough to post others in the months to come. Fortunately, I didn't take this argument up, and this is my first video, and there will be plenty more to come. The second argument for inaction is the argument that the time is not yet right, which says that you shouldn't do what you think is right in that moment because the right moment has not yet arrived. Now, clearly, this is a contradiction, and using this logic can be dangerous, and again, will lead to you getting nothing done. I'm sure that if you are or ever were a student, then you've used this exact excuse to postpone starting coursework or study for an exam. I know that I have. I'm also sure that in these moments, like myself, you knew in your heart of hearts that you weren't making the right decision. Now, Hitchens urges the reader to be aware of these arguments and to call them out when you see them in yourself and when you see them in others. So the next takeaway is to be suspicious of everything. To question the obvious and the given is essential in this regard, and being suspicious will allow you to learn loads more about yourself and about the world that you live in, and better yet, ways that you can act to change these for the better. Hitchens also notes that often the hardest things for you to see are those that are right under your nose. For example, one of the things that we take as an unjust and unfair part of life is homelessness. Those of us that live in cities take this as a sad but normal part of life. So, of course, here it's essential to question why this is normal. What can be done about it? What is being done about it? And then crucially, what can I do to take action against it? One of the good things to emerge from COVID-19 here in Ireland is that because everyone has to be quarantined, the government have found homes for many homeless people. This is brilliant, and it shows why we need to be suspicious that they didn't have homes in the first place and that this was allowed to be happening. We have to ask why. So don't fall into the trap of accepting everything as it is. Be suspicious. The world that you live in may not be working quite as it should. Your personal relationships or your professional career might not be reaching their full potential. Asking questions about these things all the time allows us to improve them. So the fifth takeaway is to form your own opinion. So don't let your thinking be done for you, think for yourself. It's very easy to adopt the beliefs and views of others when they fit in nicely with your beliefs and your opinions, but you're much better off actively looking at these opinions and then using them to inform your views rather than completely take them over. With this in mind, Hitchens advises us to be wary of people, especially politicians, that use we or us in their rhetoric. It is a populist technique after all, and in doing so, they claim to represent your views, but without your permission. Now, he also says to be wary of identity groups and identity politics. It's all too easy in these groups to lose your individuality and your ability to think for yourself. Being able to form your own opinions is, of course, essential. It's highly valued by employers and also just makes you a more interesting person to be around. So the next takeaway is about there being a time to be funny and a time to be boring. So you'll often find that when you want to criticize something or take the contrary position, humor is the best way. Now, the most impactful humor is that which is sharp and fearless. And some of the best examples of humor used appropriately come from great caricaturists. Now, they intend to shock people, and this is fantastic. I came across a caricature from The Economist a couple of weeks ago. Have a look at it here. It's brilliant not only because it's funny, but because it has a purpose, encouraging us to question information that we might otherwise accept as accurate and honest. It also tells us not to be the guy in the cartoon, blindly following instructions. Now, there is also a time to be boring when you're taking the contrary position. Now, I know how that sounds. Why would anyone ever want to be boring? But if you feel really strongly about something and people are not listening to you and you want to hammer it home, sometimes being boring is the only option you have. And repeatedly bringing up the point time and time again is the best way to get people's attention. Crucially, however, you must know when being boring is not appropriate. If, for example, you're undertaking a project at work with some colleagues, then you're not going to want to labour every single point, and sometimes you're not even going to want to take the contrary position. So again, being a contrarian is an art. It's not a matter of principle or conceit. Okay, so my next takeaway from the book is to have the courage to stand up to a majority. Don't be afraid to have a view or a position that's different to the majority, as long as your argument is reasoned and as long as the outcome is just and fair. Now, it only takes a brief look at our recent history to realise that the majority has often got it wrong. Just take the 07-08 financial crisis, for example. Everyone thought that houses were the safest asset you could possibly invest in. Now, of course, this turned out not to be the case. In the movie The Big Short, you'll see that the people that made bets against the housing market, they were the contrarians. They were the people that questioned the market and thought differently to everyone else. Think also about how you might vote in a referendum or an election. Now, the majority of your friends and your family might be deciding to vote in one way. Don't be afraid to go against that. Take their arguments and their opinions and use them to inform you in your decision-making process. Value taking the contrary position when you're sure it's right. You shouldn't be afraid to question whether you're right or not, but you should never change your opinion simply because you're in the minority. Now, the ordinary person can have a huge impact, especially when they stand up for what they believe to be right. With this in mind, Hitchens has recommended a couple authors of Eastern European descent, Czeslaw Milosz and Milan Kundera. He also recommends Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote about the Gulag in Soviet Russia, Noam Chomsky, a left-wing American political commentator, and also the story of Nelson Mandela, which is powerful and inspiring, of course. Now, I've included the link for all of these authors and their books in the description below, and if you do have the read of them, one of the nice and inspiring things that you'll find is that all of these people aren't perfect, which means that you don't have to be perfect to be able to do something good. We can all do something, in other words. So the ninth takeaway, I think, is the most powerful and one of the most important ones, and that is acting as if. Acting as if is the technique of behaving as if the change or the reality that you want has already been realised. Hitchens cites the book Power to the Powerless, written by Václav Havel when he was living in Czechoslovakia under the communist regime. When Havel realised that resistance in any militant sense was totally impossible, he proposed living as if he were a citizen in a free society with universal human rights. And this did have its impact. So if you'd like to read this book, I also have that one linked in the description below. Now, the experiences of Havel were very much extreme, but this technique can be of use to you in your everyday life. If perhaps you're going for a job interview, try acting as if you already have the job. Or if you're on a date, try acting as if it's not awkward at all. Now, maybe the latter won't work out, but you can give it a try. You see, activists for climate change employ this tactic all the time, acting as if meat were not an essential part of our diet, as if our extensive plane travels were not so essential. Now, it may seem like a fairy tale that acting as if could actually change anything so big. However, we've seen it happen before. Think to deep South America when Rosa Parks acted as if a black woman could sit down on a bus after a hard day's labour. It's enacted change, and we can perhaps do the same. So my challenge to you is to find something that you care about and act as if it was a reality. And if you want to let me know about it down in the comments below, I'd love to hear. So, number 10, my last takeaway from this book, that is work for progress. Now, this involves adopting the contrarian mindset, practicing everything that I've mentioned so far in your personal life, your professional life, and as a member of your communities. Hitchens closes the last of his letters with what he believes the highest ambition should be. And that is that one should strive to combine the maximum of impatience with the maximum of skepticism, the maximum of hatred of injustice and irrationality with the maximum of self-criticism. This would mean really deciding to learn from history rather than invoking or sloganizing it. Now, there is still a wealth of knowledge to be taken from this book that I haven't discussed here. So if you want to experience the brilliance that is Christopher Hitchens, you absolutely must pick up this great little book. For the moment though, remember to like and subscribe, and also hit that notification bell so that you never miss one of our videos. And of course, thanks for watching.